Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a good one for you, as always. You are listening to Newsflash. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have some news in from the Iowa caucus. Donald Trump has officially won. Not too much of a surprise there. He's been called the winner with 2% of the votes in. We'll see how big the lead gets. It's at 54% of the vote right now, with Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, the only two other candidates, I believe. Actually, no, that's not true. Vivek is still in the race. He's at 7%. So Haley's at 19, DeSantis at 17, Vivek at 7, and Trump at 54. Also, we have a full day update of day 101 of the war on Gaza, including how Israel, according to all reports, a pretty in-depth timeline intentionally of how they let a journalist or a cameraman die and a journalist get seriously injured by blocking access to medical aid. And we'll take a look at the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps striking anti-Iranian groups in Iraq's Erbil province, and how that plays into the broader conversation about broader regional war with continued U.S. and U.K. strikes on the Houthis. All right, so we start off with this. Donald Trump has won the Iowa caucuses, a crucial first step. Not a very surprising situation at all. Here is in the New York Times. It's going to be a really big step in his bid to reclaim the Republican nomination for the third consecutive election, as voters brave the bitter cold, look past his mounting legal jeopardy, and embrace his vision of vengeful disruption. So, yeah, just definitely something that I think the key thing to understand here is I think it almost from the jump with the Republicans was a popularity contest. It was something that was very, very clear that Trump won because a lot of people thought he was a cool disruption to the establishment. And there was no, throughout this entire process, nobody came anywhere close to matching that effect. Nobody. I mean, it was not even, in any point at any way competitive. And, that's why, I don't know if you noticed here on the show, there's been a little bit of other stuff going on in the world, but I have not really covered what's been going on in the Republican primaries as much as, some other news sources have. And that is for a very good reason, which is it does not matter. And honestly, I just don't want to spend time talking, or wasting, just telling you even to have to listen to a podcast about news events that really just do not matter. Donald Trump is going to be the Republican, nominee, and I will look, really stupid if it turns out to be wrong, but I think it's just pretty much clear. 31 minutes after the caucuses had begun, Trump called it just absolutely, lickety split, no problem. It was not even close. The result was a big setback for both Republicans, who had spent as much time and money as anyone battling out the front runner. DeSantis, the Florida governor, had previously predicted victory in Iowa. He even got Kim Reynolds, the Iowa governor's endorsement. Very precious, big deal there. Turned out to be. He's in third place now. So they're both looking at it could be potentially pretty close, but is most likely Donald Trump will not end up with a percentage of the vote under 47% in a three-way race, which is pretty. It's probably it is better than where he was by far in 2016 because Ted Cruz won. But Haley could be nipping at his heels, but it will likely be a double-digit victory for Trump when all is said and done. So in Iowa, really harsh wintering conditions had scrambled turnout expectations and preparations for the campaigns in recent days. First, a blizzard forced a slew of event cancellations, then sub-zero temperatures and a numbing wind chill on Wednesday spurred warnings of life-threatening cold from the National Weather Service. But supporters of Trump, who describes his followers as part of a broader MAGA movement, nonetheless turned out animated by his dark portrait of a nation in decline and apocalyptic rhetoric about wresting a country controlled by the left back from the brink. Trump's vows to exact retribution on his political enemies have earned him warnings from academics and Democrats of a drift towards authoritarianism. Again, we've heard this probably about 60,000 times throughout, this entire Trump term. And, we all know the threat that Trump poses, and it's definitely going to be a real, threat. And the question is, what are the Democrats doing to, in any ways, marshal it? They're, again, preparing to, and this is someone who, again, as we know, speaks to, and we've seen this ever since he came down the escalator in 2015, we've seen that how he just speaks to the absolute worst parts of the, American society, how he just makes people hate, way, way more easily, and how much he makes people just feel comfortable, saying, just taking off their true masks, especially, large parts of, white America up and down the, in our increasingly declassified society, I would say, up and down white America. And also, by the way, a good part, the polls are showing a good part of Latino America and, some other, I don't really know too much about, Asian American vote, but definitely among, Latino Americans, he is starting to, have that same effect of just letting people take their veil of politeness, take their veil of, just decency, saying the right things in the right time, adhering to social norms, saying, screw that, take it off, let's just have some fun, and let's, get back at the people who, we all kind of hate. And that is something that, it's a chaotic option. It's, I think the best way of, kind of really understanding Trump and, why people support Trump when he's at his most politically powerful is that kind of brick through the window effect of just wanting to absolutely say to the establishment, to, people, like Joe Biden in the Democratic Party, we are absolutely unsatisfied with you and what you're doing. And, and the question is, if this is going to be the reality. I think you have to have a strong amount of faith in the American justice system to think with any degree of confidence that Trump is going to get convicted before the day of the election. So what does that leave? That leaves Joe Biden. And if you're in any sort of position where you care about, I don't know about American democracy, it's I have a hard time, believing it's going to be some sort of apocalyptic event where American democracy is going to be clearly severed and ended. But if you want to have in any sort of better chance at a better world in any sphere, it is a very, very dark time. Not because Joe Biden, because people aren't going to vote for Joe Biden. I think this is the important thing. It's because that Trump is leading. It is a dark time. And again, not even just because Trump exists in the first place. It's a dark time because Trump exists and we have no viable alternative to him. We have no, powerful, compelling, positive case to be made that doesn't involve, supporting the person who is actively funding, a genocide here. Like that is the only other option, and that I think to me is really why it is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly depressing time. And it's just like, what do you want to say to people, especially parts of the Democratic base? They are right to be, there is definitely a right to have a lot of kind of nerves and, a lot of fear, especially if you're somebody who has, any kind of person of color who's experiencing increased racism during the Trump years, just having their lives, made horrible for them. Like, it's incredibly, horrific time. And I think every day it becomes more and more clear as we, process the fact the Democratic Party is putting Joe Biden out in front of us to face Donald Trump, for the second time in a row, and doing everything it can that not even a single person. I don't really honestly like getting the primary challengers, but not a single one of them can get any sort of daylight. It is really, really a dark and depressing time. And we only have the, Democratic Party and their insistence on shoving, a very, very, very flawed, genocide-enabling 80-plus-year-old man down the throats of a lot of people who don't want to have to make the choice for Trump. But the reality is, and you can debate the morality of it, but the reality is a lot of people are just going to make that choice or sit home and hand Trump the election anyway. And honestly, that is not going to be all the voters' fault when push comes to shove. It's going to be the fact the Democratic Party couldn't get out of its own way. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, so it is now time to continue with our show today, and that means continuing to focus on the ongoing war on Gaza. It's been day 101. The collapse of Gaza's health sector is being called the worst man-made medical disaster in modern history. There has been 23,968 killed and at least 6,582 wounded in the Gaza Strip. Of course, this does not count the, it's over 31,000 that are presumed dead because they are stuck under the rubble. This is, again, 31,387 plus Palestinians killed in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Israel has revised its October 7th death toll down from 1,400 to 1,147. 522 Israel soldiers have been killed since October 7th, and at least 2,193 injured. Of course, those figures there coming from the Israeli military. Some key developments. Hamas has released videos of 3 Israeli captives telling the government to stop the offensive, followed by a message saying their fates will be determined on Monday. Don't really know too much about what that, and that video eventually obviously has come out since it is now, Monday is in the books. And unfortunately, 2 of those hostages were killed in what Hamas is saying are Israeli airstrikes, with one of those hostages remaining alive. 5 Palestinians were killed this past Sunday in 3 separate incidents by Israeli forces. Top House Republicans threatened the U.S. government workers who participate in the walkout in Washington to protest Washington's continued support for Israel. U.S. fighter jets have shot down Ansar Allah, that's the Houthi anti-cruise ship missiles fired towards a U.S. destroyer in the Red Sea. So again, another kind of evidence of how this deterrence plan is working, which is not really at all. Palestinian journalist Izan Zawaidi was killed by an Israeli shelling while working in the northern Gaza Strip. So it's like 110 journalists now killed by Israel as they have arrested 25 students from Nablus's Al-Najah University in the occupied West Bank. 3 legal and human rights groups have urged reporting here on this coming from Mondo Weiss. 3 legal and human rights groups have urged the International Court of Justice to issue provisional measures as requested by South Africa. As that court case wrapped up this week, and by the way, we have a podcast coming soon about my trip there to the London protest this past weekend. It was a really great event. Hezbollah anti-tank missile has killed a 70-year-old Israeli woman and her son, according to the Times of Israel, as a continued force of escalation in this regional war. I think one of the first times that Hezbollah civilian targets have been hit. More than 48 hours of outage in Gaza have left most residents cut off as the war enclave has passed the 100-day mark. Israel's war in Gaza, again, especially surpassing 100 days. Now we're at kind of 102 after Monday. At least 44 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli bombardment so far on Monday, including 33 people in southern Khan Yunis and 12 people in a residential building in northern Gaza City. We have Al Nasser Hospital. The group documented a shortage of beds with 700 patients on the premises, along with about 7,000 in the hospital, internally displaced Palestinians. These facilities require sustained support and protection to remain operational. The increased hostilities in the south of the Strip are making it difficult for aid to reach them. Again, completely targeting, random places. Really, really awful stuff. Similarly, Matt Gilbert, a physician who worked in Gaza for more than 20 years, told Al Jazeera, "It's a horrible situation. The healthcare capacity is not sufficient at all to handle this number of 61,000 injured. They're lacking everything. They don't have antibiotics, anesthetics, or IV fluids." In the north, the mayor of Gaza City has reported that it has not received one drop of fuel in months. In the south, hospitals are overwhelmed with the wounded. Probably one of the worst man-made medical disasters in history. Important to say, meanwhile, on the West Bank, Israeli forces have conducted another night of heavy violence. This is recently in Palestinian neighborhoods and cities. Killed a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old in El Birre, 16-year-old Louay Al-Sufi during a raid in Ein Sultan refugee camp in Jericho in the West Bank, and 2 Palestinians in Ser, which is north of Hebron, while in a car, the military said, broke through the checkpoints. So, a lot of these kind of spontaneous, very disorganized, just car attacks that we're seeing now in the West Bank, which really, I think, it is just looking at it, purely analytically. These are, things that are not going to pose any sort of threat to any, civilians. These are, ramming into checkpoints with soldiers, and really show just the anger and the just absolute desperation in the West Bank boiling over. These people are essentially willing to commit suicide to, maybe injure a few Israelis Israeli soldiers around a checkpoint. Like that, if you are willing to do that at, this point in your life, as a Palestinian in the West Bank, I think that just gives you an idea of what these people are going through, and the such little hope they have for anything being uniquely or, just any way significantly better or have a chance to change in the future, I think is very, very apparent there. We now here have the UN confirming that Israel is blocking aid and denying aid missions and bringing medicine and fuel and supplies to northern Gaza, very contrary to what they're saying in The Hague. According to WAFA news agency, at least 100, this is up to, current date as of right now, just about 9 o'clock in the, U.S. East Coast, there have been 132 people killed in Gaza in the past 24 hours. Several UN agencies have appealed for faster, safer aid in terms of access to Gaza as the population faces famine and the spread of disease. As we still continue to see attacks, even as some divisions, pull out. It was interesting to see today. We have also seen a really kind of shocking massacre with back on the 11th of January with Israeli tanks and quadcopters opening fire on Palestinians waiting for food trucks on Al-Rashid Street, killing and injuring scores of civilians, according to eyewitnesses talking to Middle East Eye. At 9 a.m., me and my 2 cousins went to Al-Rashid Street after people in our area told us that trucks carrying flour were going to pass by. We arrived there at 10 a.m. because most of the streets were destroyed and filled with rubble, so cars could not pass. When we arrived at Al-Rashid Street, there were already hundreds of people waiting there. As we crossed the Nablusi roundabout, an Israeli tank appeared from behind a sandhill and started shooting at people randomly. So it very well could have been an ambush, just one of the most just disgusting scenes yet. Maybe something that they, again, tried to do, before they pull it out, as we did see, again, a few of those battalions leaving today, killing, I think it was a very great way of putting it. I saw a tweet, I forget by who, just, these Golani Brigade, I think, 3 other, numerical divisions of this kind of Israeli infantry, I guess is how it could be considered, withdrew, again, after returning -3 hostages. It's important to say they killed 3, and blowing up tons of buildings and killing tons of children. And, honestly, when we look at it, even in their most rosy projections, killing, very, very few Hamas fighters. So, of course, there is still plenty of troops in Israel, and they are still capable of committing plenty of damage. But I think it's important to, take a look at this, withdrawal, and also really realize how little they have accomplished and how much damage they have done. Okay, let's move on now to our next story. So, a few weeks ago, we saw a really, really awful situation. Just another one, probably one of the more, just because they happen to be on Al Jazeera, which is a pretty major network. Just one of the, again, I was at this wonderful Palestinian place called Shakshuka in London, and they had, it was pretty much all Arabic speakers. I was like the only, white person I feel like in there, essentially, which is very cool. I was like, just clearly white, and just still people coming to be like, Salam alaikum, and I was just like, alaikum salam, and just, it was that, just very great vibes, very great place. But they had, Al Jazeera Arabic playing there on the TVs, and it was just clearly people were watching, and people were, even I was watching, trying to figure out what was going on, even though I, do not speak Arabic. I think at the time when they were actually, breaking down the Hamas Red Triangle videos. So that's just to give you a little bit of a sense. But, very, very important network in the Arabic world. And these two guys, especially Wael Dadua, the Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief, has been just an absolute figure this war, and his cameraman Samar al-Daqqa was killed the other week in Gaza. And so pretty much what happened was Dadua was hit. He was hurt badly in the arm in this airstrike that was they essentially Israel bombs in the vicinity of a school, not a surprise. And they come in, they film in the aftermath of bombing. They wrap up, so no one's around. It's just been bombed, so no one's going to be around. And that's of course in Dadua's recounting. And there is a strike. Some of the aid workers who were there and the cameraman or some other staff members were killed. While Al Dadua is able to make it to the ambulance, but Samar Abu Daqqa he was wounded in the lower left part of his body. He could not walk to the ambulance. It was left lying on the ground. Hours went by, but the emergency workers were unable to reach him. Here, this is in the Intercept without approval from Israeli military. So this is, people, they're in the area, and they, very well, we've seen it before, could have just fired tank, fired whatever, fired any sort of weapons at even international aid workers trying to come out and rescue this guy. And it was just, blocking after blocking. They were responding, but they were, dragging their feet in an incredible way. And then, of course, when they finally get through all the roads that were, by the way, already destroyed and bulldozed by the Israeli army, 5 hours later, Samar Abu Daqqa had bled out and died. So, yeah, so just throughout tons and tons of different, throughout these 5 hours, tons and tons of different people from different humanitarian organizations and fellow journalists repeatedly pressed the Israeli military to facilitate the evacuation of Abu Daqqa, according to people involved in the efforts, as well as chat logs obtained by the Intercept from multiple journalists. The in-depth timeline of the hours before Abu Daqqa's death shows that Israeli forces did not allow safe passage for emergency crews for hours, almost until they knew it was too late. The Israeli military was well aware that an Al Jazeera journalist was lying helpless. The Intercept reporting shows, yet it did not allow emergency teams to safely pass for nearly 4 hours, and did not send a bulldozer for over an hour after that to clear through the rubble to get to the place where Abu Daqqa's body was. Which is really pretty incredible. So much of the evidence points to a targeted Israeli strike on the Al Jazeera journalist. In this area, Dadua says, there was no one but us. Therefore, there was no room for error by the Israeli army, considering that the drones, large and small, were in the sky, in the area. They knew everything we were doing the whole time, and we were targeted as we were returning. Of this, there is no doubt. He is the veteran camera person, the guy who was killed for the network. They arrived at the Farhana school. He and Al Dadua at around noon that day to cover the aftermath of the bombing. Repeated Israeli airstrikes had left the road impassable with rubble blocking the streets. Dadua said on their way, The ambulance had to stop at least 3 or 4 times over a distance of 600 to 800 meters for the crew to clear rubble to allow for it to pass. Eventually, the Al Jazeera journalists and the civil defense workers covered the final distance to the school on foot, with the ambulance drivers agreeing to wait for the team up the street. So, just kind of, picture trying to get to the school. There's a road leading to the school, multiple points where it's bombed, and they just say, okay, we're going to go wait at the last safe point, go out to get, film, and to go get, do any sort of medical work for the civil aid and defense people. So around 2 hours later, 2.5 hours, the drone strike hits. Dadwa put pressure on his wounds and stumbled the ambulance a distance of some 800 to 1,000 meters. Upon reaching the ambulance, he immediately told the emergency workers to go in and rescue Abu Dhaka. They insisted first on evacuating Dadwa to a hospital, and then they would send another ambulance to retrieve Abu Dhaka, because they can't put 2 people in an ambulance. Obviously makes a lot of sense. So in terms of what he was trying to do, but maybe if they had made that decision at the time. It's just what the really horrific things that Palestinians are forced to deal with. And obviously it's not their fault that Israel is doing this to them. But could he have had survived? It's really just an awful situation. The head of Al Jazeera's bureau, meanwhile, in Ramallah, Walid al-Omari, was doing just that. Omari told The Intercept that he first contacted the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, at 3:35 p.m. and asked them to liaise with the Israeli military to facilitate a rescue effort for Abu Dhaka. Omari said he kept in close contact with the ICRC both locally and abroad, and they put in a great effort to try and coordinate with the Israeli authorities, but according to them, it was the Israeli authorities that were just dragging their feet. Dadwa said that he learned from colleagues later that early on in the ordeal, when ambulances initially approached the area to reach Al-Dhaka, Israeli forces fired in their proximity, forcing them to return and wait for approval from the Israeli military to go in. So they could have gotten him a lot earlier, but they just did not get approval so that they wouldn't be fired on, because, apparently any ambulance in the area, Israel is just ready to fire on it. This is just, again, it's mind-bogglingly evil. There's no other way of putting it. He also said, the Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance crews had demanded a Red Cross vehicle accompany them so that they would not be targeted by the Israeli military. Meanwhile, news had begun to spread about Abu Dhaka's dire state. A freelance reporter by the name of Orly Halpern in Jerusalem posted about it to a group of journalists and the Foreign Press Association. Halpern outlined what happened, and she continued in another post 3 minutes later. What matters is to save the cameraman, and the Israelis need to allow the ambulance to reach him, tagging Ellen Krosny, the EPA's executive secretary, and adding, would the EPA be able to contact the IDF too? Krosny then responded, I'm getting involved in this. Meanwhile, other journalists in the group worked to confirm Abu Dhaka's location. One posted a map showing the photo of the 2 schools in Khan Yunis, Haifa, and Farhana, while another journalist confirmed that Abu Dhaka was at Farhana. Explaining her reasoning for sharing the contacts, Halpern told The Intercept, I believe there's power in numbers, even more so when those numbers are journalists. I don't think my voice alone would have gotten the army to do anything, particularly if the Red Cross hadn't succeeded. And of course, they did something way, way late. So really, really incredible stuff. And I encourage you to go read the full article on theintercept.com, just showing how they completely, just knowingly knew that they could help and save the journalist, fired at people trying to get to the journalist, and save him before, in a timely fashion, and then eventually let him die. Just unimaginably horrific and tragic stuff. All right, to our last story today. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has launched ballistic missiles at what it described as enemy sites in Erbil, a Kurdish region of northern Iraq, according to a statement carried out by Iranian state media. Ballistic missiles were used to destroy espionage centers and gatherings of anti-Iranian terrorist groups in the region late tonight. Some say that those were, I think there's some words going on that this was part of Mossad, claiming the group targeting, according to the IRNA state news agency, the claim was they targeted headquarters of the Israeli spy agency Mossad in Erbil. This is a terrorist attack. Again, this shows how loosely they'll use the word terrorist attack. This was literally a attack on a spy agency. Erbil would not be scared or shaken. This is said Erbil Governor Omed Koshna, according to Iraqi news outlet Rudal. It was not immediately clear if there was any deaths or injuries associated with the blast, but 2 U.S. officials told Reuters the strikes did not affect any U.S. facilities, and there were no U.S. casualties. So again, it's kind of unclear. We don't know if it's the IGRC is saying it's Mossad related, and apparently the owner of the house. This is Hem Harani, a leading politician in the Kurdistan Democratic Party, said that it was a civilian explosion where 5 people were killed. So unclear really on that. And they're saying, of course, it's Mossad, but the Kurds have been through definitely a lot in the region. It's important to say, this is just another example, though, more broadly, of the escalating regional tensions, and we're just seeing, just another. We got that attack. We got also, by the way, continuing attacks on the Houthis, which just are so completely illogical in just so many ways, and it's just like there's just no real defense for them. It's just like we are really going to bomb another country, risk starting a regional war, risk just bombing. At least for now, we're bombing Houthi positions, but this is not something that's going to deter them. You're going to have to bomb them and, occupy them, which is something that's going to be incredibly hard to do. The Saudis tried it for, 8 years, and they were unsuccessful, and they did it with, full American support and backing in a very, very big way. Obama and Trump did some horrible crimes there. And, this was not happening before Gaza was being bombed. This is an action to stop the bombing of Gaza and, also to obviously increase their own prestige and act in some ways in their own self-interest, but we know that's how this is the best way that it would stop, and the only other way is to completely bomb Yemen and take over the Houthis, which it seems just incredibly unrealistic. So it's like a ceasefire does seem to be the easiest, clearest, safest way out of this. Just tell Israel, rein it in a little bit. And just communicate to the Houthis that is what is going to be done, and I feel like that would be a much safer way than just trying to a few more bombs to do, which is what people like John Kirby and the White House strategy would have you believe. It's just ridiculous. It's not based in fact, and if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, they're going to keep doing this. They believe this strongly. And something tells me, just a few more missiles, as some of the generals out there are saying on, mainstream and social media, just a few more missiles are going to do the trick. No, I do not think so. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though. I'm sure, it's not like people are going to listen to me. So we'll all see what happens. Only time will tell. All right, we're back on Wednesday at Newsflash.